Hello. We're so happy to be here.
We're so happy to be here. We're so grateful. And by the way, I'm wearing it's now called Gretchen Blue.
Yes, that is
We're
next level. She coordinates. I said, you're going to have to do that for the whole series. Coordinate with
I am really excited to be here for the launch of Connected Lives with you, Gretchen. And thank you so much for doing this. It's a huge honor to give oxygen to this new book, which I loved. I have to just show. There is not a page that I haven't underlined.
I love a well-read book.
I want to start just by giving a little bit of an orientation to where this series came from. It seems really appropriate. Today is June 1st. And I mention that because Dr. Ruth would have turned 97 on June 4th. And it's because of her that we are all here. I met Dr. Ruth when I reported a story for the New York Times about her quest to be New York State's ambassador to loneliness. Her first quest was successful. No one had ever raised their hand to have that position before. It was the first such position in the entire country, and she was a bulldozer. This was something that she wanted, and she was going to be relentless until she was successful. So I do want to just give a beat to honor the great American icon, Dr. Ruth Westheimer. But now we're turning to another icon.
Yeah, I wish.
One of the most fun parts of Secrets of Adulthood is how we're going to start our conversation series, Connected Lives, today. One of your secrets will come in the form of a question, and we're going to turn on the house lights for one moment. So turn on the house lights. Thank you so much. And for 60 seconds, here's how we're going to begin Connected Lives. Inspired by one of Gretchen's secrets, which is if you forget how to do something and have fun doing it, if you're wondering how to get invested and throw yourself in to meet friends, be connected, think about what you used to do when you were 10 years old. Is that correct? Is that?
It's what did you do for fun when you were 10 years old? Yeah.
Perfect. Okay.
Yeah.
So for 60 seconds, you're going to turn to your neighbor who you did not come with, either to your left or to your right, in front of you or behind, and we are going to start connecting the lives in this room for 60 seconds. Yeah. So what did you do for fun?
When you were 10 years old.
When you were 10 years old. Go. That's my daughter, yeah. And my husband is leaning forward. He's the bald guy with the glasses. What did you do for fun? I love swimming. Swimming is my big thing. My parents had a pool growing up, and I just love swimming. Yeah, huge swimmer. I do. I swim a lot, which I love. I was in a master's swimming program. Do you know the master's swim? Yeah, I love it. Love it. Yeah, it's fun. All right. All right, guys, thank you so much. Thank you for playing along for those 60 seconds.
Yeah.
See, this is a fun way of beginning, but come on back. Thank you so much. All right, Gretchen, I'm going to turn to you now. Yes.
This is just an illustration of the excitement and energy that people get from connecting. Like, it always feels awkward. Yes. It always feels hard. You always think like, oh, but somebody's going to think, what are they going to think? You feel self-conscious. But in the end, it's so fun and energizing to make a connection with another person. And that's why I think that this series is like so needed, because we all know that it's true, but we have to be reminded over and over again to do the hard work of connecting.
It is hard. And I think when you lead with something that's uncomfortable, it's more challenging. But when you could start with something like you have,
Lighthearted, yes, whimsical.
lighthearted, it's much easier. So thank you guys for doing that.
And Allison likes to swim, and I like to quote quotations into books, if you're wondering.
I wanted to talk about relationships and why you think they are so important. There's a quote that you start out in the Secrets of Adulthood that I just loved, and I thought it would set the stage perfectly for this conversation today. When in doubt about how to spend our time, energy, or money, spend it on relationships.
Yes. Well, this is one of the great truths of how to have a happier life. Ancient philosophers and contemporary scientists, as Dr. Ruth shined a light on, agree that to have happier lives, we have to have strong connections with other people. Humans are among the most social species on the planet. We need to have strong, intimate bonds. We have to feel like we belong. We have to be able to confide. We need to be able to get support, and just as important for happiness, need to be able to give support. And when you look at people who are happier, they're people who have more friends. If you ask people if they're happy at work, a big indicator is, do they have a friend at work? Not like, are there people that they like to have pleasant conversation with? They have a friend, someone they could confide an important secret to, someone who has their back. Or do they feel like their direct manager cares about them personally and wants them to succeed in their aims for themselves? And so at work, at home, this is just an incredibly important thing. And it really struck me as so poignant. I was talking to somebody, because my next book is going to be about the empty nest phase, because I'm like really interested in this as a forced reckoning. And somebody said to me, well, I don't really do the friends thing. And I was like, you might want to like reassess, because that's kind of a big thing to just leave out. But there's so many different kinds of relationships, obviously, but they all are really, really important. And so it is a question, like, as we go through life, we're all pushed. How are we going to spend our precious time? How are we going to spend our money? How are we going to spend our energy? And almost always, if you say to yourself, is it going to broaden or deepen my relationships? It's probably a good thing to do if you can. So it's like, oh my gosh, it's going to be such a hassle to go to my college reunion, right? Like, I got to figure out where to stay, and I got to coordinate with my roommates, and I got to buy a ticket and all that. But it's like, is it going to broaden or deepen your relationships? Absolutely. These are precious relationships that stretch way back. You'll probably be happier if you go to your reunion. I find it to be something that I think about all the time. Is something going to broaden or deepen my relationships?
Well, it's so interesting that you talk about that, because all of that takes agency. So you get an invitation, doesn't mean you have to open it, doesn't mean you have to respond, doesn't mean you have to go. So there's a fair amount of decision making that you have to do in order to opt in. So I'm wondering what you think about being proactive when it comes to relationship building. You're prioritizing it by saying it's maybe more important than money or an object that you're investing in your relationships, but is there a mental trick that you have to do to say, you know what, I'm going to opt in, I'm going to choose, I'm going to keep choosing, I'm going to keep making that something that's really more important than other things in my life?
Well, that's a really good question. And I think obviously there are seasons of life where you are stretched so thin that something has to give. You're sort of in a season of sacrifice. But there's a couple things to remember that are really helpful. One is what research shows is that people often, as I was just saying, feel awkward reaching out. They feel like other people are going to sort of be like, what's this person doing? And they're going to be very kind of skeptical of it. But in fact, what research shows is that we like people if we think they like us. They're like, you've got great taste, clearly, because you like me. And we value relationships. And so when someone makes an overture of friendship, we tend to like it. And so people are much more open to it and willing to it. And they've shown that there's a real disconnect. The people on the receiving side are much more receptive to it than the people on the offering side expect that they would be. So always remember that there's that disconnect. Yeah.
I was just going to say, you know what else the research shows? That people underestimate the value of a compliment. So if you're wondering how you begin a conversation with someone who you may want to deepen a connection with, you might say, Gretchen, I love your dress. And you might think that sounds trite, but the research shows that people, of course, want to, present themselves in a way that is getting positive attention. And I wonder what you think about that when you're trying to expand what seems to be an acquaintance into a deeper friendship.
Yeah, no, that's a really important way. And this idea of switching an acquaintance into a friend, this is really important too, because acquaintances are really important. Meeting somebody at the dog park every day, your gym pal, these are really, they add a lot to our lives. These kind of loose ties are really valuable. But if you really want to move somebody into becoming a friend, you really do need to move through levels of intimacy. And I think sometimes people have a lot of acquaintances, so they may feel like they have a lot of people around them, but they don't have that friendship where you really do feel like you could confide an important secret, or you would invite somebody into your home, or you would follow up with them like, oh, how did your mother's surgery go, or something like that. And so I think it is an important thing to think about, knowing if you have moved, how close somebody is.
How you can move the needle.
Yeah. Now, I'm a big fan of social media. I know a lot of people are very critical, but I think it really can play a very important role in helping us maintain all these loose ties. Which, I mean, one of my secrets of adulthood is we care for many people we don't particularly care for. And I think there are people where you're like, I don't really particularly care for them, but in a way you still do care for them, and you kind of want to follow them from afar, and you want to see, and I think something like social media can make those kinds of very loose ties easier to maintain, and they do add some kind of depth to our lives and our experiences.
So let's go a little bit deeper into your book. It's really a collection of aphorisms,
Nobody knows what an aphorism
which we will define now, but they're not other people's aphorisms. They're all Gretchen's. So tell us what an aphorism is. Why did you think about this particular structure?
So an aphorism is a general observation about human nature that's attributed to a particular person. So like Mark Twain said it, or Oscar Wilde said it, or Dolly Parton said it. It's something that we know who said it, because that's different from like a folk proverb, which is a piece of just kind of popular wisdom, like a stumble may prevent a fall, or one of my favorite proverbs is, sailors fear fire more than water. Interesting. But that's just folk wisdom. So with an aphorism, it's something that somebody said. And so I've always loved aphorisms ever since forever. I have loved these and collected these. And with my own writing, I was realizing that I was kind of pushing myself to write more aphoristically. Like if I had a big idea that I was describing at some length, to really try to find a way to distill it into a sentence or two, to kind of get that mic drop effect that you get from an aphorism. So a lot of my books have them, but then I had a lot of aphorisms that I'd written that didn't really fit in a book. And then I have these are secrets of adulthood, so they're like things that are meant to help you with sort of navigating adulthood, like the perplexities of relationships, or making a decision, or knowing yourself, the kind of thing I wanted my daughters, my young adult daughters, to know, to kind of spare them the wisdom that I had learned with time and experience, usually the hard way. But then I have a lot of other aphorisms. I have aphorisms that are just observations, like the tulip is an empty flower, which I do believe that the tulip is an empty flower, but it's just an observation. And then I have my dark aphorisms, which I'm like, nobody wants my dark aphorisms, so I left those out too. Yeah.
Well, I love them too, because they may be short, but they're punchy because they make you think.
Well, that's because they're so short.
Yes.
They're easier to contemplate.
They're just distilled.
And sometimes people disagree with them too, but even in that, you have clarity in your own thinking.
Well, I have one of those. I'm going to come back. Yes. So we're going to get to one that I have a little pushback on. Okay.
Good.
But here's what I want to just start with. I love this so much because when we, Dr. Ruth and Pierre Lehue, her publicist for more than 40 years, when we were writing The Joy of Connections, we started a connections book about looking at yourself. And interestingly, in your Secrets of Adulthood, you spend a lot of time on self-knowledge.
Oh, yes.
So a secret of adulthood is getting to know yourself. For Dr. Ruth, it was self as well. And here is a wonderful quote. Self-knowledge is key because we can build a happy life only on the foundation of our own values, interests, strengths, and temperament. Yeah. And I find that to be really important, because I think so much of what I've learned from listening to your podcast and reading your books, be Gretchen, do what Gretchen likes to do.
Yeah, substitute your own name.
Yeah,
by the way.
right. Exactly. Fair enough. But I think so many times we might go along with what a friend likes to do and not really take an internal look at what actually makes us happy, or our spouse is interested in a particular activity, or our partner, and you're kind of going with that flow, but not really doing the work. And I think when you're coming to the work, as you will see in this next quote, it's such a great aphorism. What's fun for other people may not be fun for you, and vice versa.
Took me a really long time to understand. Like, I don't like the Olympics. And some people are like, is that possible? And I'm like, I'm just here to say I don't like the Olympics. But I think that there are certain things that we think, well, everybody likes to go shopping. Everybody likes to drink wine. Everybody likes to go to a restaurant. But sometimes it's fun for you, and then conversely, I've spoken to a lot of people who love to iron. I don't get it, but a lot of people say it. A lot of people like to watch the Olympics. Like, the idea that something is inherently fun, it just isn't the case. And it's fine to do things because other people enjoy them. I think Jerry Seinfeld said there's no such thing as fun for the whole family. So sometimes you go along with things. We all do that with our friends, with our family, whatever. But you want to know what is truly fun for you. Because if you're going to build a happier life, you really have to start with yourself. And I think about this all the time because people are always saying to me, well, what's the best way to make your life happier? Or what's the first thing I should do? And I'm always like, I can't tell you because it depends on you.
Or you have said, is there any way that's a perfect way to boil an egg?
Yeah. No, like,
or to make an egg. Yeah.
What's the best way to cook an egg? And they're always like, well, I don't know. It depends on how you like to eat your eggs. And then some people are like, well, I don't even like eggs. And I'm like, right, there is no one best way to cook an egg because it depends on how you like to eat your eggs. There's no one best way to create a happier life because each of us has to do it in the way that's right for us.
I think
which is very frustrating for people.
Yes, I think it is because people want a roadmap. They want
They want, yes. But if you're going to start with anything, start with relationships and self-knowledge. But those are very big buckets.
I love the idea of self-knowledge because then you can pick the activity where maybe some of those future relationships may be lurking. So if you pick an activity to invest your time in because you actually like that activity, you might actually find people in that activity that share your interests, and that might lead to a connection.
I'll give you a great example. So like 20 years ago, I realized that something that was very unusual about me, well, first of all, I love to read, which is not that unusual, but I love children's literature and young adult literature. I read it as an adult. I like it as an adult. And now, these days, that is not that unusual because there's been Harry Potter, there's been Twilight, like there's all these big things. It's kind of collapsing. But at that time, it was extremely unusual. Like, no one ever talked about an adult reading children's literature. And it really, I kind of almost didn't admit it to myself because it didn't fit with my idea of the way that I wanted to present myself as like a very sophisticated reader, like Virginia Woolf and Samuel Johnson are my favorite writers, which is true, but I had this other thing. But I was having lunch with a friend, and she was talking, and I was like, I'm kind of getting the sense that you really like children's literature. And she's like, oh, I love children's literature. And I thought, well, could we start a book group where we read children's literature? And at the time, it was like no one would do that. But I met all these people who I would not otherwise have known, very bookish people who loved this thing. We never talk about children and what children like. It's only what we like. And I remember one person came in and she like raised her arms and she's like, at last I have found you, my people. But it's like I had to admit to myself what is true for me. But then when I said, but then when you look around and you say, is there anybody else who's having this experience? A lot of times you can find people, and then you have this way to connect with people that you would not have otherwise had. So anyway, it's like, I've heard of my favorite group that somebody started, I thought, was Serial and Serial. This was a friend of mine who was an audio person. And when the podcast Serial was still airing for the first time, they would get together for Sunday brunch. They would eat breakfast cereal, listen to the episode together, and then discuss Serial and Serial. It's like, what a fun idea for a group, you know?
Well, we met 17 years ago.
We did. Yes, we did.
In preparation for this event, I looked back on our emails. I'm like, it was 17 years ago. We opted in. We went to
we opted in.
writers group that was not only about nonfiction, not only about fiction, not only about a certain genre, but about writing in general. And I looked
that was
back.
like pivotal in my life. There are 4 people in that group that I see regularly, like that I would not have been in my life had that group not existed.
Yeah, but
we should send flowers to the person who did that. She's not even a writer anymore, I don't think.
That's true. Yes, I
But
think
she had a huge influence on many people's lives.
I want to talk about another wonderful aphorism that you have, and I'm going to tell you why I like it so much. It's better to invite friends over for takeout than not to invite friends over, or I'm going to rephrase this. I'm sorry. I don't want to butcher it. It's better to invite friends over for takeout than to not invite friends over for a home-cooked meal. Yeah.
That's like, well, Voltaire said, don't let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And I think we're expressing the same idea in different ways. Yeah. Yeah.
Well, I like it because I think so many times we put friction where there doesn't need to be a headwind just to be social. It doesn't have to be the perfect event. You don't have to have the perfect apartment, the perfect dining room table. You just have to want to get together.
Well, and again, I think people are much more forgiving than we think. They recognize that it's a hassle to call people together, and they're just happy that somebody's doing it, and they're very tolerant of whatever.
Yes.
You know.
Yes. Okay. Here's another aphorism that I really love, and I have friends here who can attest to the validity of this one. One of the best ways to find friends is to make friends with the friends of our friends.
Yes, that is called triadic closure. And there is no more elegant way to say that because I have tried so many times. But it's really true. The best way to make friends is to make friends with the friends of your friends.
So now here's the pushback.
Okay, good. I've been
Yes.
in suspense.
How about jealousy? Or what do you mean you're going to be going out with that friend? I introduced you.
Oh, territory.
Yes,
People feeling territorial.
What do you say about that, Gretchen Rubin?
That's tricky. It's still the best way to find friends.
Yes, it is. It is tricky though, because I imagine, are there people who relate to that question? Like, if there's territory.
Yeah.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Hands going up.
But it's interesting because when they look at social networks, one of the things they look at is the density of it. Because if you have friends who are all like, you're the hub and there's just spokes, and they're all one-off relationships, that's not nearly, you don't feel the same sense of belonging as you do if everybody's connected to everybody else. And so really it is to your advantage, even if you're feeling territorial or jealous, to say, it's better for me and my friends to have my friends be friends than always be like going through me. Maybe that's a good thing to remind yourself. My sister, who is a TV writer in Hollywood, I was asking her once about, because it's such a competitive industry, and I said, well, how do you handle it, your feelings of jealousy, if like a friend gets like a big opportunity or something? And she said, I remind myself that people succeed in groups. And if something good happens to a friend, it's probably good for me. And I was like, even if that's not true, it's a very nice way to go about the room. And I think that maybe here, like if you feel yourself experiencing that jealousy, is to say, actually, if they become friends separate from me, that's actually going to give me, I might feel threatened by that, but it's probably actually making my friendship network more secure.
And to be honest, that's why your aphorisms are actually so meaningful, because on the surface, it was easy to reflect upon. Yeah, I guess friends are friends. That totally makes sense. But it got me thinking about the ways in which it shows up. Where would I want to thwart that relationship? No, I actually would not. But it got me thinking, which I think is so brilliant.
No, no. I think that's one of the advantages. That they're sort of, because they are so short, they're easier to think about and to sort of. Can you think of illustrations, or can you think of counterexamples? Yeah.
So you may think wrongly, because I'm making you believe this to be true, that all of Gretchen's Secrets of Adulthood are about relationships. That's what I'm choosing to focus on tonight. But this book is so rich in wisdom in so many different capacities that my daughter is here, and you will be getting a book tonight. I promise you, I am buying you one for sure. And I just think there are other secrets here that are deserving of our attention. These are not aphorisms, but you call them simple secrets of adulthood.
Yeah.
So this is more like our lightning round portion of.
They're more like hacks.
Yes.
I love a deep transcendent truth, but I also love a hack. And as I was writing the book, I could not resist keeping this list. And when I submitted it with the manuscript, I really thought my editor would say, like, okay, Gretchen, you've had your fun. They do not belong in this book. But she's like, I like them. I think they're fun. I think people find them fun. So,
I do find them fun, and so we're going to do some lightning round.
Lightning
okay.
round.
All right. It's okay to ask for help.
Why is this so hard?
Yes.
It is so hard.
And by the way, the research shows the reason why it's so great for you to ask for help is because you will actually be the recipient, hopefully, of that assistance. And you know what happens? That friend who you're helping will be more inclined to ask for help later themselves because they felt good giving you that help. So there's reciprocity that happens because of that. All right, here's another one.
Franklin, as Poor Richard, has an aphorism about that.
Do you remember what it is?
It's something like the best way to make a friend ask a favor.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Okay. People, I love this one. People probably aren't as interested in your hobby or your travels as they seem to be.
I mean, I just think this is a good thing to keep in mind.
I think that's great. I think that we are not curious enough in our relationships. And if we ask more questions, I think that our relationships will deepen. Mm-hmm. Okay, another one. Don't wait until you have more free time. You may never have more free time.
Yeah. No, I suffer from this because I always think like, well, in the summer I'll have all this open time, or after the holidays, all this time is going to open up, and it never does. And it never does. If it's important, I have to do it now.
Well, going back to how we began this conversation about self-knowledge and also reflecting upon what we talked about before about proactivity, I think there's we get into a routine of streaming Netflix, and that's easier to stay on our couch. It's easier to say no to an invitation than perhaps to opt in. And I think this is very similar to don't wait until you have more free time. You may never have more free time. In fact, your time actually may get more truncated. You can get sick. You could break your ankle. Mm-hmm. It might get worse.
Right. Yeah.
It might get worse. So now is the time to invest in our relationships. Here's another one.
Here's a proverb. Ooh. The best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And that's very true with making friends.
I love that. If you can't think of a topic of conversation, ask, what's keeping you busy these days?
I really like that one. It's like it works. Or if you have somebody who you should know what their job is, but you don't know what their job is, I always say like, well, what's keeping you up at night? And that usually they have something that's keeping them up at night. That's a little less cheerful perhaps, but it gives you clues.
Again, but it's being curious about somebody else. Yeah. It's like stopping to pause and to say.
Okay, but can I just say something? Okay, here's another hack. I was just thinking that I should have added this hack. If somebody asks you, what's new? How are things? What's keeping you busy these days? Do not say, not much. It's the same. They are saying, I invite you to tell me something interesting that we can talk about. Don't say, nope, right back to you. Now you come up with another question. Yes, it's like, have an answer, because it's an opening. And when you say not much or just the same, also like if someone's like me and they can't remember exactly what you do, it's like there's no clue there. So I like it when people come in hard with a topic.
And by the way, you know what Dr. Ruth would say? Rehearse your answers. Like before you go to a party, if you feel like you're going to stumble over what's new, maybe something is not going really well in your life right now. Maybe you've lost a job. You don't really want to talk about what's going on in your work life. So rehearse maybe what's going on in the headlines. Maybe that's something you want to talk about. Maybe it's a celebrity gossip, note that you want to refer to. I think there's nothing wrong with trying to prep for something if it's going to give you what you want, which is a connection.
Well, on the Happier podcast, we talked about this, having a standard answer if you're going through something painful. And I got the idea for this because a friend of mine was going through a really bad divorce, and she just said every time somebody asked her about it, she felt very out of control. Sometimes she said too much, and then she regretted it, and she's like, I just had to decide what was I going to say? And so she and I, we workshopped it. What could she say that would answer their questions, make it clear she didn't want to answer any more questions, but kind of respond. And so it was, John and I are getting a divorce. It's not what I wanted, but now I do think it's the best for the both of us, and I'm hoping that we can keep it friendly. And it's just like, and that was it. And so, but if it's like she had her talking points, and so she didn't have to scramble and have the like anxiety of reaching for words. Am I saying too much? Am I, she wanted to feel in control of the conversation.
I think it's so important. I think that people prep for interviews when you go on a podcast. People prep when they're being on a job interview. I think that the idea of prepping for a social situation probably doesn't get enough attention.
Yeah, and as somebody who'll go through his news feed to have like some kind of like, just like some silly lighthearted news thing, like, did you see that's the biggest ball of string or whatever, just as like a conversation starter.
Yeah,
too.
I love that. I love that. Okay. If someone might not remember your name, reintroduce yourself. Yeah. Don't wait for that awkward moment where you're making them feel uncomfortable. Yeah. All right.
I reintroduce myself constantly.
Can I give you some of my
yes.
aphorisms and say?
Yes.
So I've done some prepping, and in the back of Secrets of Adulthood, there is a space for you to kind of record your own. And so I took your challenge, Gretchen.
Okay, I want to hear these. I can't wait.
All right.
I wish I had my pen and paper. I would write them down.
All right. I think my daughter will probably laugh when I say this. Okay. When walking your dog or riding in an elevator, take out your AirPods.
Ah, interesting.
Yes? Agree? Disagree?
An elevator seems so brief.
An elevator is brief, but those brief moments, we talked about them before, when you're in brief moments of community, we underestimate how valuable it is to feel like you belong in community. So when you're going out...
Oh, wait, but what if there are other people?
Yes.
If there are other people in the
so
elevator.
I didn't write the aphorism correctly.
Okay.
I needed a good editor.
Okay.
Yes, so I would have benefited from a good edit. Yes, if there... Yes, not by yourself. Okay. AirPods are permitted when you're by yourself. I'm talking about in community.
No, I get it. Because then you're like, I'm isolating myself.
You're isolating yourself. Yes. But speaking of, when you are going to your coffee shop, your dry cleaner, when you tune out, you're losing the opportunity to build connections. Even those micro connections make you feel like you belong in a rooted sense to your neighbors. And I feel like
that's very good. And it does feel impolite. Yes. To like not be. In fact, I was wondering about this because like a lot of people now are starting to use AirPods as hearing aids, and I almost wish they were a different color or something so you would know is somebody, because you think that somebody is not going to be able to hear you and isn't wanting to listen to you if you see that they have their AirPods in.
Yes.
Where obviously if they're going to use them as hearing aids, it's just the opposite. So
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Good point. Okay, here's another one. This is from me, Allison Gilbert aphorism. Okay.
Yeah. Credit.
When deciding which leftovers to keep after a lovely dinner.
Ooh, I like it already.
Consider what you can put in your omelet the next morning.
Okay, that's good. Just about anything.
Okay. All right. I'm going to go back to some other questions that I have that are particularly about habits.
Wait, can I say something funny?
Yes.
So a friend of mine was saying that she bought the book for her 3 children, and she wrote her Secrets of Adulthood in there, but each one was for that child, like her Secrets of Adulthood for that child, and she gave them to them on Mother's Day, and she said, "I'm asking for Mother's Day immunity to give you this advice." Because, we're not supposed to give advice as parents. And so I thought that was funny. Mother's Day immunity. They were like, yes, you can give me all the advice. And it was things like, stand up straight, stuff like that.
Well, that is the perfect segue for another one of my favorite aphorisms that I'm going to truncate because it's a little bit longer in the book. It's about adjusting our own behavior when it comes to our adult children. We can't change our children's natures by nagging. And I wonder if there's an expiration date on that one.
Probably right away.
All right, and I love these two. I'm going to loop them together. This is about how we show up in conversations, 2 aphorisms that I think belong in the same type of conversation. One way to thwart a conversation is to refuse to answer. Another way is to talk and talk. That's one. Number 2. If we can't be loving, we can be kind. If we can't be kind, we can be courteous. And if we can't be courteous, we can be quiet. These 2 aphorisms...
I like that. Ooh, you got it. Yeah.
I think these are deserving of some embellishment because I feel that we too often don't look at ourselves, again, going back to self-knowledge being so important, of how we do show up in relationships. And what inspired you to write those?
It's interesting because a lot of times each aphorism will come from a story, like something that I experienced in my life, or something, and I don't want to say the person's name, because it's not a complimentary thing. But I was reading a New Yorker profile of someone, and there was a mention of how he was very well liked and very well respected, but there was a thing where people said was part of his management style to just talk at you so much that people just went away. And I've experienced that a few times in my own life, where it's something like you don't want to even want to ask a simple question, because you're like, I don't know how long I'm going to have to sit here to get the answer, and I may not even get the answer with all and more questions. Just it's more talk. And I just started thinking, and then my father, who is a very socially skilled person, I was with him at a party, and somebody asked him kind of an uncomfortable question, and he just kind of like, and he has this air of kind of like absent-minded cheerfulness, and he answered in kind of this odd way. And I asked him later, and he was like, "Yeah, I just didn't want to answer that question." So he was able to. There are ways that you can thwart questions deliberately or accidentally. Yeah. But,
no, I love that.
Yeah, and it's not always a positive thing. I mean, clearly, it's often not a positive thing. That's almost a dark aphorism, I would say. That's bordering on a dark aphorism.
You mentioned that you had many dark aphorisms that didn't make it
I
into.
have so many dark aphorisms.
Can you share maybe one or two with us that didn't make it into the book?
Well, let's see. One is. Praise is a form of judgment. Encouragement can be an attempt to control. And I thought of this because, have you noticed that you'll think, because I often will say to myself, is it because or despite? Like if you say like, well, despite the fact that blah, 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 it's like, well, maybe it's because. And I was thinking to myself, isn't it odd that there are people who are widely adored and respected, and yet they're very thin-skinned and defensive? And then I thought, well, maybe it's not despite, it's because. I'm like, of course, because they're constantly being judged. And they know, oh, everybody says nice things now, but they're judging me, and it can be different tomorrow. And then encouragement is an attempt to control. I know that from studying rebels. If you know anything about my 4 tendencies framework, often rebels will say, if somebody encourages me to do something, I don't want to do it. And that was really puzzling to me, because I love encouragement and praise, but I see it can be an attempt to control. And another one is, how do we judge those who courageously surmount obstacles they've put in their own way?
Well, I know you like.
That's pretty dark.
That is dark. But it's funny when you're talking about your dad, I was reflecting on mine. And I think that he was very careful doling out the praise, because when it came, you knew that he meant it. And that was powerful. That'll go in my dark aphorisms book somehow.
That doesn't seem very dark.
When you're growing up, not getting the praise, I'm like you, I love a gold star. It's hard. It's hard.
I simply cannot resist quoting from a children's book
at
this moment.
Good.
Okay. Has anybody read Understood Betsy, or am I like literally the only person? Yeah, I think I'm literally the only person. So if you know the book Understood Betsy, which is a towering classic of children's literature, there's an amazing example of just that principle.
We're going to go to questions soon, but I do want to end on an aphorism that I think Dr. Ruth would have shared tonight if she were here.
Let's hear it.
In the book signing, here's what I think Dr. Ruth would say. And if you buy Gretchen Rubin's book, you will have great sex for the rest of your life.
All right, okay. Let's channel Dr. Ruth. I love it. That's hilarious.
If you could turn on the house lights for the duration, we're going to bring in some audience questions, which is wonderful.
And you get a gold star if you ask the first question, because nobody likes to ask the first question.
Yes, and I think there is a mic that's going to be running around for questions, I'm told, or maybe they're just, you could stand up. Is there going to be a mic? No?
You just repeat it.
I think I'll just repeat it. Yes.
I'll be first. Hi.
Yay,
Gold
first.
star,
Gold star.
yay.
So my name's Jesse. I work with a organization called Reading Rhythms.
Oh, yes, of course.
Yeah, so we host reading parties. Um, so I've been working. I own a bar in DC. I do a lot of thinking about connecting people and building community. But I realize today in the economy, one of the only ways you can afford rent is through places that serve alcohol. So, but I miss arcades, I miss bowling alleys, I miss those places where I don't have to do that. And I wanted to see if either of you have given thought to the economics of community, economics of connection, and where our societies can do better to support places that don't mean I just have to have, you know, wine or beer or vodka or whatever.
Yeah.
That's so interesting. So you're saying like these places, if you're the owner of the place, you can't afford rent unless you have the money that comes in through alcohol.
Alcohol is high enough that I can afford New York City storefronts
Interesting.
versus roller rinks that
Sure.
aren't here anymore.
Sure. Bowling alleys. Yeah. Yeah.
All those other places that back in older times, there was more places
Yes.
to go that wasn't just alcohol. You could build connection with people
Right.
in different ways. So that, to me, it's there's an economic
Right.
question. I don't know if
Yeah.
that's ever come up.
Well, I know that it's a huge area of study. Not so much through that angle, the kind of rent, which I think is actually very fascinating. But there, like, we need third spaces. Like, do we have green space, and is there programming there for people of all different ages and all different interests? Libraries now, library. If you haven't been to a public library, it's amazing what they have going on at the public library, the things that you can check out, the services you can get, and a lot of times they'll have like a teen center for teens to hang out and like all different kinds of things. It's, what they're called third places. So I think there is a lot of interest in doing that, but sort of as part of government. But you're talking about like, well, what about the businesses that used to exist, which is different. A library isn't the same thing as a roller rink. That's a really, really great question. Yeah, and you don't want to only have places where there's alcohol, obviously.
I think the Aspen Institute has a program called the Weave program that was put together by David Brooks. And I think if you subscribe to their newsletter, there are lots of grants that are now being offered for programming that does lean into what you're describing. So to me, that would be a wonderful avenue to even see where some resources can come in to support Reading Rhythms and other organizations. And I love Reading Rhythms. You were so supportive of our book when it first came out. So thank you, thank you, thank you. Other questions? Yes.
Hi, it's me. My name is Nicole. I am someone who will talk a lot when I meet you. If I'm in a social situation, I will share maybe too much. I'm certainly learning in my old age, like maybe to share less. But I also have this strange contradiction of like being in a social situation and not caring about necessarily making new relationships. Very specifically, I'm thinking of the other parents of my children's classmates, where I'm kind of like, I don't care, like sometimes I find myself caring, but sometimes I don't, and maybe I attribute that to I have a very close knit family. I think I come from like an enmeshed family structure where there wasn't always room for all these other outside relationships, but I try to like make myself care a little more, but I feel like I'm not really.
But do you have other friends,
Yes.
like,
Yes.
that you see?
Yes.
And do they live within a half an hour of you?
Some of them yes, some of them no. Yes.
Okay.
So let me just repeat
Yeah.
the question for the audience who's online. And hi, online audience, we see you. Hello. So Nicole, is your question about whether or not you need to force yourself to invest in these relationships? The question is about if you don't really care about the parents of your children's friends, do you need to force yourself into those relationships? That's your question, correct? So Gretchen, what are your thoughts? You have 2 daughters. How did you approach that?
I have so many thoughts. One is with friendships, like duration matters, intimacy matters, but one thing that matters is proximity. It's not great to have all your friends be like your college roommates who are spread out all across the country, or your childhood friends, you're still so tight, but you don't live close to each other. There's something about having friends that are like within a half an hour where that's like a special relationship. So you want to make sure. And the thing that's nice about having friends who have children, your children's age, is you're gonna see them easily. It is a kind of third space. It's a kind of relationship where you're going to be forced into contact with them. My sister Elizabeth calls me a happiness bully, because if I think there's a way for you to be happier, I can get kind of insistent. So now I'm just going to happiness bully you. And I'm going to say, I challenge you to find 3 people that you could genuinely be friends with of that group, that you honestly think, I see a spark, I think I could be friends with. You don't have to be friends with all of them, but are there 3 people where you're like, yeah, I think I could be friends with them? And then really try to turn it into a friendship, because you're going to be with them for such a long time, and you're going to have so much in common, and you're going to be seeing these people all the time. If you had like 3 friends that it would make your life a lot more fun. And it's like, it's hard to have too many friends, especially people that you're already going to be seeing. Because usually the problem with friends is you can't get the time and the energy to see them. These are people you're going to be seeing all the time. So it seems like such a waste not to try to have some friends there.
I like that idea too, because what it emphasizes, at least to me, my interpretation of what you just said, when you choose some and not all, that's choosing quality over quantity. And that is always the most important thing. If you have 1 or 2 really good connections, people that you want to spend time with or want to invest your limited resources with, that's always going to be a better investment of your time than breadth, I think.
And also, I would say, do not think that your friendship should track your child's friendship. I have a lot of friends that I made through other parents, but my friends and my daughter's friends don't track at all, which can be kind of awkward sometimes, but not really as much as you would think, because I have the people that I like, and she has the people that she likes, and they don't match up.
I wonder if there's a way of knowing if the online audience has questions. I don't want to ignore those folks who are online. I'm going to put the why on the spot. I'm not quite sure if that's possible, but I do want to acknowledge our friends who are watching from home. If there is a way the why can let me know, I do want to acknowledge that you guys are here, and thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate it. Are there other folks here that are, oh, hey, Robin. Elementary school friend in the house.
Oh, there we go.
I love that. Oh my gosh.
My question is, how, like this connected live, if you have friends that you've known for a long time, but you sort of drifted apart.
Hello, Robin.
Correct. Drifted apart lately because they may have kids and you don't, or you have kids and they don't, but you miss that connection. So how would you use some of your affirmations or strike up a conversation to get back connected?
Well, again, it's if you're thinking about how to spend your time, energy, or money, spend it on relationships. So that is the kind of thing, like, should you go to your high school reunion? Yes, you should, probably, because it would help you keep in contact. But again, it's just this idea that people really do value relationships, and even if you've drifted apart, if somebody said, "Hey, we haven't talked in 10 years, but I'd love to see you," I guarantee you most people would not find that to be weird at all. They would be very glad that you reached out. A friend of mine doesn't have children, and she was saying, because I'm writing about the empty nest, she was saying, like, oh, it's so fun for me because all these people who like drifted away because they were like caught up in their children's lives, like now they're like, I'm back and I want to have fun. And she's like, I've been having fun the whole time. And so there is, and I said, and she said, it doesn't matter that time passed. Like, of course, like you want to maintain the friendship, but if you could, whenever you can pick it up. I mean, and also that's a good secret of adulthood is if you're feeling lonely and you want to connect with more friends, a good place to look for friends is dormant friends, like the friends that you had in the past but that you have fallen out of contact with, because then you don't have to create a whole new relationship. You already know that you like somebody. You just need to like take steps to get it ignited again. So it's never too late to try to reconnect with a friend.
I agree with that. We have 2 minutes for maybe 1 or 2 more questions. Yes.
Hi, my name is Ella. I haven't read the book yet, but now that it's going to be in the house
Well, this is much more for you, Allison.
Well, let me repeat the question. The question is about the gender disparity in terms of relationships. And I would say a very interesting
Particularly young men.
program that I just featured. I host a program for a platform called Reimagine. And we just highlighted 25 innovators in 2025 who are doing this Herculean lift to bring people together. Reading Rhythms, of course, is such a great example of an organization that's doing that. And one program sticks out in terms of this question, Ella, which I think is a really, really good one, is that sometimes for men, they enjoy doing things shoulder to shoulder, not eye to eye. So think about that. Projects where you do, where you build, where you might be in sport or what have you. You're doing things side by side. Think about parallel play when your kids are younger versus eye to eye, where women may be more inclined to talk and go deep fast. So there's something to be said, so the research says, about shoulder to shoulder versus eye to eye, and specific programs geared towards men with that in mind. I'm going, unless you have anything to add to that.
No, I think that's a great answer.
What I want to say, as we conclude this portion of the evening and go into the reception and the book signing, is just to really share with you what a great friend Gretchen Rubin is.
Oh, thank you.
So in researching for tonight, I mentioned that I went back through my email history, and I found that we've known each other for 17 years. And in those 17 years, there have been a lot of questions that Allison has asked Gretchen.
And vice versa.
And, well, no. No. And the advice is always there. The patience is inexhaustible. And you are the perfect person to have written The Secrets of Adulthood. It is full of your generosity, and I feel like I'm the lucky recipient of your friendship, and I thank you for tonight, Gretchen.
Well, thank you. I feel so lucky I get to be the first in this series.
Yes.
It's so perfect. Yes.
So we will have great sex for the rest of our life. By buying this book, we'll go into the reception, and thank you guys so much for coming and making our first Connected Lives event such a success.